He did not learn proper English. You know, the United Kingdom, they don't. So maybe he misheard.
What's up, everybody? Jackson here. And this Dartmouth Political Union debate between Mehdi Hasan and Michael Knowles is one of the most substantive exchanges in this whole series, built almost entirely around specific court rulings and named judges, rather than talking points. Mehdi's case centers on a striking claim that federal judges, including several appointed by Trump himself, have ruled against the administration on due process grounds. Thousands of times in just a few months, Knowles pushes back with historical precedent, citing past presidents who also stretched constitutional limits. I want to check the specific legal claims here, and I also want to name something directly that happened near the end of the exchange. Stick with me, get that like in, get subscribed, because precision matters on constitutional questions like this. Now let's get into it.
Anyone who tells you Donald Trump is not violating the Constitution is gaslighting you and or a member of his cult, right? The facts are very clear. We can go through them in order. I mean, right now, if you look at the Constitution, Donald Trump is violating the Appropriations Clause, the Emoluments Clause, the Elections Clause, the Taxing and Spending Clause, the Take Care Clause, the Declare War Clause. He's also violating the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, the Sixth Amendment, the 10th Amendment, the 14th Amendment, maybe soon the 22nd Amendment, as he suggested yesterday. And, you know, yes, other presidents, to go back to your question, have violated norms. Other presidents have certainly violated clauses of the Constitution. But no president, certainly not in modern American history, has launched a multi-pronged, across-the-board, open assault on, forget norms, on the amendments and articles of our Constitution in the space of less than 18 months, right? Yes, previous presidents have violated perhaps a single constitutional amendment, sure, and been called out for it. But none of them said they plan to terminate the Constitution, as Donald Trump once did. None of them said, I don't know. When they were asked, as Trump was on Meet the Press last year, is it the job of the president to uphold the Constitution? I don't know, he said. None of them declared themselves to be a king or a dictator, even for a day. None of them were rebuked by their own vice president for trying to violate the Constitution and the rule of law. What did Mike Pence say? I know Michael's a big fan of Mike Pence. I came specially with a Mike Pence quote. Mike Pence said, President Trump demanded, I choose between him and our Constitution. If you are pressuring your own vice president to put you above your Constitution, you're not just violating norms, you're violating the Constitution, you're violating your oath of office. And it is very clear tonight that Donald Trump is a clear and present danger to the Constitution. Forget norms, let's raise the bar. To the Constitution, to the articles and amendments of the Constitution, to our rights and liberties, to our democracy. And you don't have to take my word for that tonight, just take Mike Pence's.
The Mike Pence standard of constitutional jurisprudence. Okay, wonderful to be here. Thank you all for having me. You know, my father is a Dartmouth graduate, so I hope I don't do the family too much shame this evening. But I don't think I will, because we have to Mehdi's point, we have to narrow in on what exactly we're discussing. What does it mean to uphold the Constitution? And I certainly hope that my opponent here does not mean some kind of pedantic literalism that merely looks at the text of the Constitution, though we should certainly do that as well. But to uphold the Constitution, it would seem to me, would entail upholding what the Constitution has meant, how the Constitution has obtained, how it has in fact governed our country from the beginning through the present. And so I think my opponent here is trying to break me away from citing historical precedent and how other presidents have upheld the Constitution. And I think that's for very good reason. If I were in your shoes, I would do the very same. Because when you look at how the Constitution has in fact been put into effect in the United States, no reasonable person could even suggest that Trump is not upholding it. You know, if we were to use this very limited, pedantic, literalist reading of the Constitution, then we would have to disqualify virtually every single president we've ever had from upholding the Constitution. All the modern presidents who have surveilled en masse, all of the great presidents who have violated habeas corpus, who have interned people, two great presidents and two great parties, the Republican Abraham Lincoln and the Democrat Franklin Roosevelt. But going back even further, we would have to disqualify Jefferson for the Louisiana Purchase. We would actually have to disqualify President Washington, because President Washington declared neutrality in the French Revolutionary Wars, and he was accused of violating the Constitution by no less a man than James Madison, the father of the Constitution. But Madison gets his comeuppance because Madison would be accused of failing to uphold the Constitution when he annexed West Florida. So I think when we take a look at what the Constitution has meant, how it has been interpreted by the three co-equal branches of government, adjudicated by the Supreme Court, laws enacted by the Congress, and then, of course, the executive power and the president, we will find that the Constitution prevails. The warnings of the histrionic critics of President Trump, who have been promising us that he's on the brink of shredding the Constitution for about 10 years now, any day now, it's coming, I think we will find that President Trump is indeed the president and the Constitution, nevertheless, and I think very much for that reason, prevails.
Would you like to respond?
I would love to respond.
Okay, you have 1 minute.
The best thing about social media is you can see what's going on in the world. And today I looked at Michael Knowles' tweet advertising this event, and underneath the tweet, Tim Pool, another podcaster some of you may know, posted what looked like a Grok-generated list of previous presidents who had violated the Constitution. So I was able to prep myself for the debate, knowing that Michael would cite all of those examples, which he did. Thomas Jefferson, Louisiana Purchase, ratified by Congress. Abraham Lincoln and FDR, Civil War and World War II. I don't see either of those things happening right now. We can go through the list. I've already conceded that previous presidents have done unconstitutional things, but Donald Trump has done it in a way that no other president has, in a time frame no other president has, without the excuses that other presidents could at least point to. World War II and the Civil War, you think that's what's happening in America right now when he goes after migrants in Home Depot parking lots? No, that is not what's happening right now. And let's just be very clear. Michael says no one could dispute that he's upholding the Constitution. He says histrionics. Do you know who Terry Doughty and Nancy Brazel and Amy St. Eve and Trevor McFadden and we go through the list, Fernando Rodriguez Jr., Alan Albright, Eric Committee, Carl Dudek, Justin Lang. We can go through the list. Do you know who these people are? They are Trump-appointed judges who have ruled against Donald Trump since last January in key constitutional cases. First Amendment, Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, 14th Amendment. They've all said, Donald Trump, what he's doing is violating the Constitution. These people are not liberals or Marxists, as Stephen Miller says. They're not doing histrionics, as Michael says. They are looking at the Constitution, and even as MAGA judges, they're saying you've gone too far. You have violated these amendments of the Constitution. It's Trump judges saying this. Not me. It's Mike Pence saying this, not me. Michael can make these arguments about liberal histrionics. The problem is now is that people with eyes and ears who are not MAGA partisans see what is happening here. Donald Trump is doing things that presidents have not done before, including ignoring a 9-0 Supreme Court ruling. Just to respond very quickly on the main point about deporting foreigners, you said at the end, who have no right to be here. Notice the phrasing. Deporting foreigners who have no right to be here. How do we know they have no right to be here unless they have due process? That's the whole point. When you end up deporting American citizens, do you know they deported American citizens? Terry Doughty is a Trump judge who last year ruled that a 2-year-old American child who was deported with her mother against her father's wishes, who was in the US, he said, the administration just deported an American citizen without any meaningful process. That was a Trump judge's verdict when he heard what ICE had done, right? In Minnesota, another Trump judge, her name is Nancy Brazel, appointed by Donald Trump, she said, the government asserts the right to arrest thousands of people, put them in an overcrowded warehouse, and then deny them their right to due process. That's Nancy Brazel ruling against this administration on Fifth Amendment grounds. Again, Trump judges. Michael seems to be under some illusion that we're here to debate Democrats versus Republicans. Unlike Michael, I'm not a partisan. I'm not here to blindly defend Democratic presidents. I don't really care what Harry Truman did. I already conceded. Presidents have done bad things, but no one has done stuff like Trump. Let me give you one example. 18 months he's been in office. 18 months. He's defied court cases, defied court orders in 1 in 8 cases. AP just did a story, the Associated Press the other day. 31 court cases that he lost, he's just ignoring the court orders. Presidents haven't done that before. They violated the Constitution, then a court says, hey, you did something wrong, and then they fix it. They don't say F off to the judges. That is what this president does. Let me give you another example on the immigration front. Between October and February of this year, according to a recent study, hundreds of judges across the country ruled 4,400 times. I'm going to say that again. 4,400 times judges across this country ruled that Donald Trump and his administration were illegally detaining migrants in this country without due process. 4,400 times. You find me another president, I'll wait here all day, who has done that in a 4-month period. 4,400 rulings by judges. By the way, in 1 in 4 cases where judges rule against Trump, these are Republican-appointed judges. So this argument from Miller and co, these are all Marxists. No, these are judges, conservatives, liberals, Democrats, Republicans, saying Donald Trump's violating the law even when it comes to migrants, even when it comes to foreign students who have a right to be here and have a free speech right under the Constitution. First Amendment covers foreign students in this room. I hope foreign students here know that.
I'm a little confused by my opponent's argument because he tells me he's not a partisan and he's not here to debate Republicans and Democrats.
Not to defend.
Almost the very first word out of his mouth was Mike Pence and appealing to all of these Republican judges. But listen, I think the Republican Party is the worst party in the United States other than the Democrats. So, I'm not here to, as my opponent does seem to be, to go tit for tat on Republicans versus Democrats. We're here to talk about the Constitution. And we can't talk about how the Constitution has actually governed the country unless we talk about the people who have effected it, and those people are Republicans and are Democrats. But I'm also confused by my opponent's reaction, and I think this might be because my opponent here has the misfortune of having grown up in a foreign country where he did not learn proper English. You know, the United Kingdom, they don't, so maybe he misheard when I spoke. But I answered in the affirmative. Of course, illegal aliens, in most cases, have the right to due process, but they don't have the right to lengthy due process. This has been a precedent for many decades, and in all of those cases, my opponent here cites the AP, this involves, these problems with the courts generally involve delays more than outright refusals, and both Barack Obama and Joe Biden have also been guilty of the same delays. So I'm happy that in this one case, we are in agreement. The illegal aliens deserve due process, and now that they have it, they need to get out.
They're not getting it, Michael, that's the problem. It's a great question, and I'm glad you mentioned the speed issue. Michael mentioned speed a moment ago when it came to migrants. There's no speed issue. Donald Trump bombed 7 countries last year after claiming to be the peacemaker and insisting on a Nobel Peace Prize, but he got a FIFA one. Bombed 7 countries which weren't attacking us. He started this year by bombing Venezuela and kidnapping the president of that country. Again, not a country that was attacking us. There was no self-defense right, no UN resolution. You can only go to war in this country under international law if it's self-defense or if it's authorized by the UN. Not the case in Venezuela. Not the case in Iran. Iran obviously was not attacking us. We were in the middle of negotiations when we attacked them. And Marco Rubio admitted we attacked them because Israel was about to attack them, not they were about to attack us. So there was no speed, there was no justification, and it is a good question about the balance. And again, I suspect Michael is going to say, well, all previous presidents have declared war without congressional approval, which isn't true, by the way. George W. Bush, I'm going to go home and take a shower after this, but I'm going to defend George W. Bush. George W. Bush went and got an authorization for the use of military force against Afghanistan in 2001. He went and got an authorization for the use of military force against Iraq in 2002. No, now I feel disgusting, but George Bush did that, right? Barack Obama, when he was about to bomb Syria, tried to go to Congress, couldn't get the votes, did not bomb Syria. Now, Libya, Barack Obama did go and violate the Constitution and the War Powers Act. I will agree with that. But let me say a couple of things here. Number one, Barack Obama, he would argue, let me make the case for why it's different, to go back to your question. There's no comparison between Iran and Libya. First, there was a UN resolution for Libya, which was being enforced by a NATO operation that the US joined to stop an imminent massacre of people in Benghazi. That was the stated aim. No UN approval in Iran, no NATO mission in Iran, no imminent massacre of civilians. That happened in January, not when we attacked. Number two, Barack Obama claimed it wasn't a war because it was a limited military operation because no American troops were at risk and no regional escalation. Well, in Iran, 13 Americans dead, hundreds of Americans injured, not just regional escalation, but global fallout, right? Americans suffering at the pump because of this war. And number three, I would say this. Look, this is undoubtedly unconstitutional against Congress. Donald Trump's admitted it. He said, if I call it a war, I'll have to get approval. And then he called it a war. But I will agree it was unconstitutional under Obama, and I think it's unconstitutional under Trump. And I hope Michael will agree that we can both agree that in both cases, neither president was upholding the Constitution. I'll add that to my list of constitutional abuses by Donald Trump tonight.
President Trump's policy in Venezuela is not only out of step with American constitutional norms, it is in fact part of American grand strategy dating back to 1999.
Prison in America is a nicer place than Venezuela.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, let's just deal with some issues that you raised there. Michael made an admission he perhaps shouldn't have made there. Do you notice what he said about Maduro? He said, a lawless president, his words. Am I being dishonest? Is that what you said? A lawless president.
Not with reference to Trump.
But you said a lawless president would have just killed him. That's funny, because what did we do in Iran on day one of that war? We killed the leader of Iran. So by Michael's definition, Donald Trump is a lawless president. He went to war in Iran without congressional approval, without a UN Security Council resolution, as we've already discussed. He went to war in Venezuela without a congressional approval or a UN Security Council resolution. The idea that he did it because the guy's a drug trafficker is hilarious. I'm no defender of Maduro. Let's see what the court says. But he pardoned another Latin American head of government who was in American prison for cocaine trafficking into the US. He pardoned him. So real consistency there when it comes to drug trafficking. As for Nigeria, number one, it's not a genocide of Christians. The First Lady of Nigeria is a Christian. The Defense Minister is a Christian. Terrorist groups like ISIS in Nigeria and Boko Haram kill Muslims and Christians alike. It's a horrific violence, but it's not a Christian genocide. No one actually believes that. And even if it was, that's not the debate. The debate is, did he have the legal right to bomb Nigeria, or did he have to go to Congress, which he did not. He never goes to Congress. And let's take a step back here. Let's get out of the weeds here. What is the common thread tonight? It's not about just migrants or free speech or students or wars. It is about a president who doesn't just test the limit of the law, he puts himself above the law. Donald Trump doesn't recognize congressional restrictions. He doesn't recognize Supreme Court restrictions. Michael doesn't want to talk about a 9-0 Supreme Court ruling saying you got to facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And Trump says to an ABC reporter, I could, but I'm not going to. No president has done that before. You want to play whataboutism? And it is whataboutism. Tell me, which president said after a 9-0 ruling, yeah, I'm not going to do it. There hasn't been one. It's only Donald Trump who does this when it comes to war, when it comes to migration, when it comes to the Supreme Court. That is why we're saying he does not uphold the Constitution, because the evidence is clear. And if Trump were here tonight, he'd probably say, yeah, you're right.
Let me address something plainly before getting into the substance. At one point in this exchange, Knowles responded to Mehdi's arguments by suggesting his opponent, who is British, did not learn proper English and might have simply misheard him. Mocking someone's command of English based on their national origin in the middle of a substantive legal debate isn't a rebuttal to anything Mehdi actually argued. It's a deflection, and it's worth naming as exactly that, rather than letting it pass as just a jab. Now to the actual substance, because there's a lot of specific checkable material here. Mehdi's central claim is that federal judges, including ones appointed by Trump himself, ruled against the administration roughly 4,400 times over a 4-month period on due process grounds related to immigration detention. That's an extremely specific sourced figure, and it's worth verifying directly against the study he's citing and against court records, since a number that large and that specific deserves scrutiny before being repeated as settled fact, regardless of who's citing it. On the claim about the 9-0 Supreme Court ruling being disregarded, this refers to a real, documented case regarding the return of a wrongly deported individual, and it's a matter of public record that the administration's compliance with that ruling became a significant news story. The specific characterization of what was said in response and whether it constitutes outright defiance versus a slower compliance process is worth checking against the primary reporting and court filings directly, since how a legal dispute like this gets resolved often involves more procedural complexity than a single quote captures. On Knowles' historical counterexamples, Lincoln suspending habeas corpus, FDR's internment policies, Jefferson's Louisiana Purchase, these are all real, documented historical instances of presidents stretching or violating constitutional limits, and they're a legitimate rebuttal to the idea that only one president has ever tested constitutional boundaries. Mehdi's response that the scale, frequency, and stated intent differ from these historical cases is also a fair distinction to draw. Whether specific violations happen during declared wartime national emergencies versus during ordinary peacetime governance is a meaningful difference worth weighing, not just dismissing as whataboutism on either side. On the Venezuela and Iran military action claims, whether these actions had congressional authorization or UN Security Council backing is a specific checkable legal question under the War Powers Act and international law, and it's worth verifying directly against the actual authorizations or lack thereof that were in place for each action, rather than accepting either debater's characterization without checking the primary documents. On the Nigeria genocide characterization, made these specific counterclaims that Nigeria's First Lady and Defense Minister are both Christian, and that groups like Boko Haram and ISIS-affiliated factions in the region have killed both Muslims and Christians, are checkable factual claims about the composition of Nigeria's government and the pattern of violence in the region, and they're worth verifying directly given how often this specific claim about a Christian genocide in Nigeria circulates without that context. Here's what I'd leave you with. This was a genuinely substantive debate built on citable court cases and named judges rather than vague assertions, which is rare and worth taking seriously on those terms. The accent comment near the end doesn't change any of that underlying substance, and it shouldn't be allowed to either overshadow the real legal arguments or be brushed past as harmless banter. So tell me, do you think the scale and frequency of legal rulings against an administration is a meaningful way to measure constitutional overreach? Or does that framework risk being applied selectively depending on who's in office? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more of these breakdowns that check the legal record directly, get subscribed, because that's exactly what this channel is here for.